You know, our world is being shaped all the time by two really powerful and kind of invisible forces. On one hand, you've got the deep human intuition of a master craftsman, something built on centuries of just feeling and experience. And on the other hand, you have the cold, hard logic of a computer algorithm, all about pure computational power. Today, we're going to dive into how these two forces are clashing, and maybe even combining, in one of the most fundamental things we do: building our world.
And that gets us to the big question, right? For centuries, architects had their experience, their intuition, but now, with all this incredible technology, that whole process is being turned on its head. So are we just handing our tools over to the machine? Or is something much more profound going on here?
To really get this, we've got to go back and meet an architect who saw a real crisis in the way we build. He looked around and felt that modern architecture had just become lifeless. And he went on this amazing quest to try and find its soul again.
And that was the mission of Christopher Alexander. He saw all these buildings that just lacked the warmth, the depth of older, traditional places. But instead of just copying the past, he decided to try and reverse engineer beauty itself. He wanted to find the hidden rules that make some places feel so right and others just feel so wrong.
So Alexander laid this all out in a book called A City Is Not a Tree. He argued that modern planners thought of cities like these neat, orderly trees where everything branches off perfectly. But he said, no, that's not how it works. Real living places, he believed, are more like a complex, messy web. Everything overlaps, everything's connected. You know, a bench in a park isn't just a bench. It changes how people talk, how they feel, how the entire neighborhood breathes. He wanted to figure out how to design for that living complexity.
Okay, so that's the problem, right? How on earth do you design for that kind of living, breathing complexity without just getting completely overwhelmed? Well, Alexander's answer was to create a whole new kind of system, a new design language that pretty much anyone could use.
And the heart of his whole system was this idea he called the pattern. Now, this wasn't a blueprint. A pattern for him is really about a relationship. It's about a common problem, like, say, needing a quiet little corner in a big, busy room, and the core idea of its solution. The final form can change, but that core relationship, the human need it's solving, that stays the same.
Let's take a super simple example, the alcove. It doesn't matter if you build one in Oslo or Kyoto, or if you use stone or wood. Its function is exactly the same. It gives you a little pocket of retreat while you're still connected to the bigger space. It answers this fundamental human desire. And that's the genius of it, right? One single pattern can be used a million different ways, always perfectly adapted to its context, but always solving that same core problem.
And look, this wasn't just some high-minded theory. People were actually inspired by this stuff. There's this great story about a guy named Richard Organian. A local architect designed a farmer's market for him that looked like, well, an ugly carport. Then Organian found Alexander's book, A Pattern Language, and he just felt this instant connection. He hired Alexander, who then went and talked to every single grower to design a market that really worked for them. It was proof that these ideas could create truly authentic human spaces.
But this is where the story takes a really wild turn. While a lot of architects kind of dismissed Alexander's ideas as just being nostalgic, a totally different group of people were listening very, very carefully. Software engineers. They were struggling with these massive, complex programs, and they discovered his work. They realized his patterns were a perfect solution for their problems too. They needed reusable solutions for common coding challenges, and Alexander's language gave them a way to build software that could grow and adapt and still feel intuitive. The language meant for building our physical world became a cornerstone for building our digital one. Okay, so, well, Alexander is digging deep into human feeling and intuition. A totally different way of thinking about design is starting to bubble up. And this one wasn't born from intuition at all. It was born from pure computational power. This is the world of the algorithm. So first up, you've got something called parametric modeling. Instead of drawing fixed lines, you define relationships and parameters. Think of it like a design skeleton. If you change one bone, one single variable, the entire model instantly updates. This lets you create these incredibly complex, flexible shapes that would be literally impossible to draw by hand.
Then you have algorithmic design. So if parametric modeling is the skeleton, then this is more like writing the recipe. You create a set of logical rules, an algorithm, and the computer follows that recipe to generate not one, but thousands of design options, exploring possibilities way faster than any human ever could.
And that brings us to the next level, generative design. This is where AI really steps onto the stage. You actually stop telling the computer how to design, and instead, you just tell it your goals. You say, I want maximum natural light, and I want to use the minimum amount of structural material, and here are my constraints. The AI then goes to work, generating and evolving thousands of solutions, finding the most optimized design, often in ways a human would never, ever have thought of.
And the stuff you can build with this? It's just breathtaking. I mean, look at the Swatch HQ in Switzerland. It's this incredible free-form timber grid shell where none of the 4,500 pieces are identical. Or look at the Google Bayview campus, which uses geothermal energy and is designed for unbelievable efficiency. These aren't just buildings anymore. They're complex systems that are only possible because of this kind of computational power.
So here we are. You've got these two worlds colliding. On one side, you have Alexander's superhuman-centric, pattern-based design. And on the other, you have the raw, data-driven power of the algorithm. And this collision forces us to ask a really big question about what creativity even is.
And this, creates a real tension. It's a classic double-edged sword. On the one hand, these tools absolutely enhance our creativity. They let us explore forms we couldn't even dream of before. But what's the trade-off? Does relying on software kind of dull our own intuition? Does losing that tactile feel of sketching by hand disconnect us from, the soul of the design? We gain so much efficiency, but you have to wonder what we might be losing.
But maybe it's not a fight. Maybe it's not a choice between one or the other. Maybe the future isn't about the architect versus the algorithm, but the architect with the algorithm.
And this idea of a partnership isn't some new sci-fi concept. Way back in 1969, a technologist named Nicholas Negroponte imagined an architecture machine. He saw this future that wasn't about master and slave, but a true partnership, a symbiosis, he called it, where the human and the machine would create together, each one making the other better.
And check this out. A recent study gives us a peek at what this actually looks like in practice. On the left, you see what two humans created together, and on the right, what a human and a machine created as partners. What they found was fascinating. Even when the machine was just mimicking the user's moves, the person often felt like it was a real partner. Why? Because they couldn't totally control it. And that little bit of unpredictability, that's where the magic happened. It led to these unexpected new forms, a genuine co-creation that surprised even the human who was part of it.
So it all comes back to this, right? Christopher Alexander was searching for this timeless language of design, something rooted in human feeling. Computational design gives us an entirely new language, written in code, capable of almost infinite complexity. As these two worlds don't just collide but actually start to merge, the very definition of architect is changing. Is it the person with the vision, the AI that optimizes it, or is it the unique, symbiotic intelligence that emerges when they work together? That's the future we're all building, one block or maybe one line of code at a time.